Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Are you a brewhead? I'm a brewhead. Y'all are brewheads? Yeah, we brewheads. So pour a glass of craft beer, we can do this. Yeah.
What's good, y'all? This is C Certified Brewhead, and welcome to episode 108 of Beer and Others, the podcast Adjunct series. We are back again. If you guys are watching on the video, you'll see the sign behind me. We finally got the neon sign I've been wanting for a long time. I knew that whenever we had a house, I'd be able to build a little set. So shout outs to Tomas, who from Signorama came through today. He built all this stuff. He does it like after hours at home and shit. It's I love it. It's totally just changing up the vibe of the set. So we're getting it. We're almost done. So if you're listening on audio, definitely go check out the YouTube just so you can see it and listen however you see fit. So this evening's guest has been on the pod, I want to say at least twice. There might have been another time I am not thinking about here. I've known him for about 5 years now. He's doing some really fantastic things at the brewery where he's at. I'm excited to hear the updates. It's been a year and a half between pods, so you know, as it goes in the beer world, a ton has changed. A ton changes in that amount of time. A year and a half, you know, is kind of like 5 years in the beer world. So, guys, please welcome Brandon Judd of Avling Brewery in the building. What's going on, brother?
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on, as always.
Oh, mate, do you remember how many times? Is it? I can think of two, but I kind of feel
I
there
think
might have
this
been
is
another one.
this is the third time.
This is the third.
Yeah,
okay.
5 years ago with Lalo, that had to be one of the first.
That would have been the first.
Episodes.
That was episode 40, I think, in the 40s. Damn,
Okay.
the original series, like, and this is a whole new
in
one.
the original series.
Yeah, and
Got
then
it.
we did it last May with yourself and Max at Avling, and that was sort of, you guys have been open a while at that point, I imagine, right? When did you open?
We opened in July of 2019, so we're coming up 3.5, I guess, when you get to the new year.
Wow.
So yeah, you know, you talked to us about halfway through our life to this point, and now you're talking to us, you know, at the age we are.
Love it. Love to see it. Like I was just saying off air, I think this is like a nice little, you know, a year and a half is a great time to kind of do this, because obviously, you know, we're going to go through it tonight, but, you know, the beers have evolved, and you've sort of got this whole new series that we're going to be drinking tonight. So I'm excited to hear all about it. So first things first, my man, let's get into it. So this is a beer we're going to kick off with Meerkat. Now I want to make sure. So I know this changed, and you just told me off air, and I forgot the exact specifics.
Yeah.
So would you just explain what this bad boy is?
Yeah, so Meerkat is a grisette we make. We've made it 3 times now. Originally, it was I guess what we would call a clean grisette. So it was made with a Séance strain that we really like, which meant it was very dry, aromatic, had a lot of fruit character from the hops and the yeast, but like a single culture beer, like something, you know, inspired by Saison DuPont, or, you know, a lower alcohol version of a beer like that. This year, we've rolled out a sort of growing line of beers that are canned sours, and they're like proper mixed fermentation sours, so they come from the same culture as our barrel-aged beers.
So cool.
And so this is a mixed culture of brewer's yeast, Brettanomyces, Lactopedio, Pichia, all sorts of stuff that kind of lives in these barrels, and it's truly our house culture now, because it's you know, evolved quite a bit over the last 3 years.
Okay.
We use this culture to make some stainless aged beers, and they get canned in can conditions. So we got a separate canning line for it during the dark days of COVID, and started rolling out these beers in cans with
That
full
is
tops.
very, very cool, man. First of all, actually, wait till you pour. I remember having this. I guess it would have been the first or second time that you did it. So this is a different beer. So I'm gonna do my usual little photo review thing here. Loving the colorful labels that we're gonna see on all the labels. They look fantastic. That was the first thing that jumped out to me. Like, everything is like, before you guys ran with the color blocks, which I was always a big fan of. I love color blocked cans. But now you've got this really funky, fun, bright, like pastel colors. It's a little almost hard with the neon here to see it, but this is like, it's like baby blue, pink, and red.
Yeah.
Very cool, bro. I love it.
We really liked the original labels, but they were is great work. But we were looking for something that had a little more individuality to it.
Gotcha.
And kind of moving from elements of design to a bit more of fitting for the way that we make beer, which is sort of fun but refined, sort of agile but elegant, is what we're shooting for.
Ooh, I really like that for an episode title, Agile but Elegant. That's awesome. Very cool.
That's the goal.
First and foremost, brother.
Yep. Cheers.
Cheers.
So yeah, this is a full mixed fermentation beer aged in stainless for about 3.5 months, and then can conditioned for 2.5 months.
So stainless for 3.5 months. Stainless, and for 3.5, and then in cans for 2 months. Cans for 2 months. Okay. Mm-hmm. The difference between, obviously, I would imagine it would be like a marked difference between this and the original, being that now it's full house mixed firm yeast versus kind of that more standard saison. So I guess we're getting like, I imagine this is significantly like I was expecting, because when I think mixed firm, I typically a lot of them are a lot more, for lack of a better word, like a puckering sour, whereas this is smooth.
Yeah, so we're always playing around with acid profile. It's sort of, for us, the most important part of a sour beer, because the difference between types of acid and types of sour is immense. Just think of having a Sour Patch Kid versus a spoonful of apple cider vinegar. Both of those are sour. Both of them are acid. They feel pretty different. And so we're looking for different levels of acidity depending on the beer that we're making. So there's a few different levers you can pull, and we've learned enough about our culture to know how to kind of push it towards more acidity, towards less acidity. In this, we are not looking for a lot of acidity. This is probably the lowest acid that we have in any of our mixed firm beers. But it's fitting for the style. We want it to be crisp and bitter and aromatic. And the acid is really just there to liven it up and give some extra texture and kind of accentuate the fruit flavors, because fruit comes with acid in the natural world. So we have always found that a bit of acid will always make fruity beers taste more fruity.
Love it. That was a great description there. You're mentioning with you mentioned bitterness. That's one of the things I'm getting here. Is it like I'm getting like bitter citrus, like that grapefruity, pithy kind of thing? Is that accurate? Yep.
So I'd say grapefruit peel, lime, lots of lime, some white fruit like lychee. It uses sort of it's the wrong term, sort of new age German hops, Hallertau Blanc and Hull Melon. And these come with a lot of really interesting melon, lychee flavors that you don't often see in like Pacific Northwest hops, for example. And so we kind of wanted to lean into that, but also give it a little bit of that citrus edge and enough bitterness so that it's not astringent and unpleasant on the palate, but it's got a bitter hit that sort of allows the acid to fall away. So the acid takes you to the end, and then the bitterness gives you a real hard stop. And you're left with like a pretty nice slightly dry mouth, but quite refreshing. So something that's really great on a warm day or really anytime.
Well, I was about to say it's about to be really cold, and I could drink this anytime. It's you're right, and it's only 3.8, right? So it's a light. This has an insane amount of flavor for 3.8, man. Does that come from? Is a lot of that from the mixed firm yeast? I imagine.
Yeah. So the flavor density and complexity that comes from the mixed culture is just like completely different than what you'll get from pure culture. There's also like a reasonable amount of honey in this, and it's can conditioned with honey instead of with sugar, which is how you'd normally do it. So that brings a little extra florality and a little extra texture. There's something about honey that even if it ferments totally away all the sweetness, there's a feeling you still have in honey that lasts right through the end, no matter what you throw at it. So I can't speak to what that is chemically, but experientially, we've seen it repeatedly that we get this extra hit of texture and softness. So that's helping as well with the depth of flavor.
Hell yeah. I know I've definitely, is it Carry On? That's the beer that you have with the honey. It's like a honey ale, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yeah. So, yeah, exactly. So we'll taste that later today. That one uses a lot more honey than this. Like 3 times as much. That's a beer driven by honey. The honey is sort of one of the many things in this beer that kind of we are adding in with the plan of having sort of depth, complexity, and a density of flavor without having it be too heavy-handed or overwhelming. At 3.8%, it still should be light and agile, which is sort of where the name comes from. Like it should be able to kind of bounce around your palate.
I love it. It's really cool, man. I really appreciate talking to you, and when we drink these beers, I just feel like there's so much to it, and it's equally where you could have people just sitting on the Avling patio and just crushing the beers, not even thinking about it and just enjoying it, or you can get kind of really nerdy and deep with it for a beer that's 3.8% as well. Like it's fascinating, man. I love it. This is great. The mixed firm can. Okay, so first things first, though, for everyone, normally we would go into the Brandon's history in Avling. We've definitely done that on the last pod, so we wanted to be, if you want to go hear all of that, I definitely recommend that. But tonight we're going to be definitely talking about this new mixed firm series of cans. So I want to start with sort of where did the idea come from to. I mean, obviously the mixed firm and sours are arguably a significant bulk of what you make at Avling. Your bottle series are highly regarded. There's some phenomenal ones that we're going to get to tonight as well. And, how did it start to go from the, having those ones in bottles to now having this like can series that, is like a sort of, what's the word? Like an offspring of the more larger bottles.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It started. There's sort of 2 things that really motivated it. One was like over time we just learned a lot more about how our culture operated and the kind of ways that we could make it mature faster. So most of our barrels are like between 8 months and 2 years old when we blend with them. But over many turns of these barrels, we filled them. We always fill them with sort of a different style of wort. And we sort of discovered that there's certain wort makeups that the beer came to maturity in like 3 months. And once that started happening, we realized that kind of unlocks a quick turn mixed fermentation sour program. So that idea started to percolate, especially as we're really happy with the character we were getting out of this culture. Then the other thing is we will have some of these beers later on where we create these barrel-aged blends to go on Ontario fruit. So these are a bottled series, and they're sort of our like flagship sours. If you haven't had them, I highly suggest trying them. They're at an affordable price point in small bottles, and we're very proud of them, and they're very ageable. But what we've done is we're not the first brewery to do this. It's a really great idea. After we make a beer like Pale Fire, which is our peach beer, taking the beer off those peaches, you've got a ton of character left in the fruit. There's just like no way to take everything out of the fruit in one go. So what we do is we put a second beer into the tank. So when we transfer Pale Fire off the peaches and get ready for bottling, we have another beer ready in a tank, and the same day it gets transferred back on. So we were looking for a way to package and sort of explain the difference between turn 1 of the fruit and turn 2 of the fruit, because clearly there's a lot different about the process on our end, but on the consumer end, they're both peach beers.
Right.
So, and you don't always get to sit somebody down at a bar and give them a 5-minute rundown of your beer. So you have to have the discernible differences and like an easy way to understand sort of the different quality level in terms of like ingredients usage and time that goes into a barrel aged beer versus a stainless aged sour. Both are very high quality beers, but one of them is more work by at least fivefold. So as a result, we realized we couldn't really put it in bottles and effectively sell it. So we were trying to sort out maybe a new bottle. We looked at stubbies for a while, but nothing really fit our requirements for the bottle strength and for ageability and aesthetics. So that's when we started looking at cans. And anybody who works or lives in and around beer knows that cans are king at this moment in time. And we wagered a good way to get these styles of beers into people's hands, because I do think that, as you said earlier about the mixed fermentation being, the impression is that it's going to be puckering. You're not alone in that. I think that's the dominant assumption. And like we put a lot of work and effort and time into making beers that are not like that, because we would like them to be something you can have 2 or 3 of. And so it's a lot easier to sell people on buying a can that's just a little more expensive than your average can than jumping in on a bottle.
It's a great point. Really, really good point. One thing about the cans I noticed when I was looking at them in the cooler here, the tops are gold now.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
I love, dude, it's so classy. So the tops, is that on all cans are going to be gold, or just this series of mixed ferm cans?
It's just this series.
Just this year. I love that. That's even cooler. That's sick. Yeah.
It's a way to differentiate them. I've always wanted to play around with gold ends or tops. We call them ends in
ends.
In
okay, good to know.
Ends, yeah. Tops is more descriptive, but the manufacturers sell them as ends.
Okay. Learning something.
Yeah. So yeah, gold ends are available at a good price now, and I've always wanted to use them, and we just never really had a good way to incorporate them. And then, this line showed up, and we're trying to find ways to differentiate them. So the label is a big difference, but beyond that, it is a nice little extra, piece of flair, call it, to have your quote unquote fancy cans have a gold top, and your everyday cans have your standard everyday silver top.
I think that helps, like you said, with the price point there. If people aren't really sure about it. So you see it and you're like, oh, this is fancy. Like you said, fancy cans, which is a cool name. I also
it's got
really...
real gold in it.
Does it really?
No.
Damn it, Brandon, you got me! You got me, you bastard!
But it is a nice story.
No, hey man, I would believe anything you say, so fuck. One thing I always appreciated about what you guys do is you only use short cans, and like you said, your bottles are like 375 or 355, whatever it is, basically the same as a can. It one thing, and I imagine this is probably intentional, but one thing, obviously, any beer drinker, we always end up with a cellar if you drink beer over time, because you buy these big ones, like, oh yeah, then all of a sudden it becomes a special occasion beer, and you need a couple of mates to split it with, which is cool, but I really feel like there either is or should be a rise of the smaller packaging, kind of more of a single serving. You can still split these and it's great, or you can just knock one back and it's also very doable. You don't have to worry about finishing stuff. Was that an intentional thing from your side as far as like making these higher end beers, but making them so damn approachable, both financially and packaging and size wise. So it's not like, oh shit, I got this 750. I'm never going to drink this type of thing.
Yeah, the approachability is more of sort of a core tenet of beer and food and wine for me. I really believe that the some of the best foods, wines, beers in the world are confident enough to be subtle, delicate, and drinkable.
Do you say confident
And I
enough
think
to be subtle?
yes.
That's brilliant. I love that.
Uh,
Sorry, continue.
I really think that being subtle is a little scary, because if you miss the mark, it's just plain. But if you hit the mark, there is something about complexity that you are sort of, at least for me, what I like is you're kind of reaching for that flavor, and it's always just maybe a little out of reach. And so you are taking a sip, and you're trying to pick out every flavor, and some of them are eluding you over and over again, and there is like a draw to that, and the confidence to make a quiet beer or a quiet wine. Just look at Japanese food. I learned a lot about that when I worked at Godspeed. Something like dashi, which is like a core sort of preparation in Japanese food, is extremely subtle, but its absence is loud in Japanese food. So it is doing a lot of work. It's just confident enough to not have to be the center of attention. And so that is what sort of speaks to me, and like that's only my opinion. Like making food or wine or beer that's very strong flavored is its own challenge and its own it's extremely valid and impressive. But for us, what speaks to me is subtlety and trying to achieve sort of elegance through that. So that's sort of why the beer tastes like it does. In terms of the smaller bottles, that is about approachability. In terms of like, I can open this because I want to, and I don't have to wait to share it with somebody, and I don't have to wait for a night where I'm happy to have 3 glasses or 4 glasses. They're 375 milliliter bottles, which are like demis, so half a champagne bottle. So that works out to like about 2 glasses of wine. And with the alcohol percentage that most of these come in at, one bottle comes in as about 1 glass of wine. So it's just something that I've learned over time. I'm always happier when I have a little bit smaller bottle in my cellar, because I can say, like, I'm in the mood for like a really nice beer tonight. I can just drink it. I don't have to fret about the volume, the alcohol, or the price. And it's just a great size for a single person to have 2 glasses, or for 2 people to have 1 glass each.
I love that. I love that. The confident to be subtle thing, I feel like that is like an ethos for life, though. Like, I can think that's so much. I don't know. I think that's brilliant. Like, anything that's sort of too loud and like it's because they don't have enough confidence. Whether I'm thinking of like rappers I know who are just but then the people who are genuinely good just do their shit, and they're confident and they're great, and they're subtle about their maybe approach. You could probably say that with different companies and just personalities and stuff. I just feel like that's such a cool way to sort of summarize quality, I guess. And subtlety is often quality. Yeah,
I really that's my style as well. I do want to stress that, like, that's not the only path, but
of course.
A really great distinction that I read once, I think Carrie Fisher said this, is like the difference between humor and wit, like someone trying to be funny and someone being witty. One of those requires a lot of attention, and you kind of have to control the room, and the other is much quieter and confident to be there and gone. And if you got it, like a witty remark, if you got it, you get it, and if not, it just passes by. And there's like a confidence in that. And I would say I'm a person whose wit speaks more to me than humor. So, but I like that example because, like, everybody likes comedy. Everybody likes a comedy show. So being loud in the center of attention and really like pushing your ideas and your flavors forward is a very valid way to do things. It's just not our way.
I love that, man. This is a really poignant sort of way to distinguish your specific approach, and obviously, like you said, there is more than one way to do it. But I think it sums up exactly what you're doing very, very well. Okay, sick. So
there's one thing I do is overthink things. So,
where does that
opportunity to try to say it out loud?
Hey man, I'm here for the waxing poetic and such. It's fun, right? This is what we're here for, just to get a little deep sometimes, a little philosophical. Yeah. It's cool. It resonates with me a real lot. I'm gonna talk to Tiff about that. I like it so much. Like, I just really feel like there's something about that approach that resonates. I still love a big loud beer too. If you want to talk about beer, like, I'm definitely want some haze that punches me in the face with some hops and stuff. That's totally great. But it's cool to sort of like consider that in that way, like a different other approaches in that way. I just love it. It's very, very cool. Okay, sweet. So the can approach, that's how you got to the can. That's what we're talking about. Did you have? Are you rolling them out like all at once, or are they kind of like have they been like a slow, like here's one drop and a few weeks later?
Yeah, no, it's a drip.
It's a drip. Okay.
Once a month type of thing. For a couple of reasons. One, we would like to have a decent amount of these beers available at once, because it's a good way to display, talk about, and sort of teach on how these things taste different. If you can only have one at a time, it's easy to forget the specifics and the subtleties of each one. But if you're able to have them even 4 days in a row, 4 different beers, you remember everything about yesterday's beer, where you don't remember everything about last month's beer. So that took time, because all of these beers take months to make, and we only have so many tanks we can dedicate to this, because any equipment we dedicate to this type of beer can only be used for that type of beer, because it's a huge cross-contamination risk. So we've only got a couple tanks to do this with.
Right.
Just trying to build up a little stock. And at the same time, a lot of these beers follow seasonal ingredients. So, when something is ready, we get that ingredient in, we make the beer. And so the spreading it out represents sort of our early season fruit, our mid-season fruit, our late-season fruit, our wineskins, our herbs, our flowers from the roof. It's a lot of how Avling runs, both on the food side and the beer side, is following seasons as much as we can. Obviously, the main ingredient in beer is not seasonal. Barley and hops, like, they are, I guess, seasonal as far as there's one harvest, but they're both very good at keeping in a way that peaches are not. So,
right.
Obviously there's things about our brewery that is not that are not seasonal, but this line is really driven by seasonal ingredients. So this is sort of the exception. You can call this sort of the baseline. The rest of the beers we're going to try today all have some ingredient that we can only get once a year, and so this beer only comes out once a year.
That's dope. Makes it extra reason for people to make sure you grab it, right? Because you're going to wait 12 months till you get it again. That was a good segue. Do you want to get into the next one?
Sure, yeah. So what I think we should do is try one of these barrel-aged beers.
Okay.
So it's a good way to sort of explain a couple of the sort of core beers of this new can line are on second use fruit, which is a really nice method for doing things.
Okay.
So we should try the OG fruited barrel aged beer first, and then we'll try its baby cousin.
I'd love that
afterwards. Gonna talk about the difference, so we can try them at the same time.
Okay. Which one is that? Pale Fire?
I got Violet Moon here.
Violet
which
Moon?
is our new one from this year.
Oh, I have not had that. I was looking forward to that. By the way, I think we had Pale Fire in our last podcast. I'm looking forward to, even if we don't have it tonight, that's great because I get to sit on it for a bit. But this, I think, was my favorite beer you've ever done. It's just insane, bro.
That's the next year's version. So we've made some.
Do you know what? That's awesome because I may have to double check. I might have sat on my last bottle, like kind of intentionally, because I knew they were. Yeah.
If you didn't, I've got more I can send you.
Okay. I'll double check because it'd be fun to kind of do like a side by side, like the first run and then the second run to see.
Yeah.
Very much looking forward to this one. So Violet Moon Barrel Aged Farmhouse Ale on blue plums and Gamay skins. Is that from Rosewood as usual?
It is.
Love it. That makes me very, very happy. Okay, so this is a 7.5. Okay, so this is the big boy. Love it. Is this one of the stronger beers you've done?
This is one of the stronger beers we've done. Just a lot of fruit.
Yeah.
There's no way around the fact that all that fruit's sugar. So so we get 1,800 pounds of plums in. The majority of the plums are a type called violet blues. They're really beautiful. Dark blue skin, and then like really deep yellow flesh. And 1,800 pounds, and they all get processed by hands. It's an enormous job. We just did it recently for next year's batch. No one's happy on those days, but it's worth it. So,
hey man, I bet.
1,800 pounds is like 2 giant bins, 4 foot by 4 foot by 2 feet deep. So 2 of those all get squished by hand.
Jeez. When you say squished, yeah.
So we do this with the peaches too. The peaches we have to use a knife, and we cut off a little bit of the peach flesh just to open it up, so that it releases its juice and its flesh more readily. We were doing that last year with the plums, and then I was getting bored and frustrated near later in the day. And I picked up some plums too hard, and I squished them with my hands, and then we realized that it was like significantly faster to just we're all wearing gloves, so you have sanitized gloves, and you pick them up and you squish them, and then they go into the tank.
That was what I was going to ask. Yeah, I guess not.
But, with the plums, it was a big difference. But you get a little bit of a claw at the end of the day because you've been basically hitting a stress ball for 6 hours straight.
Jeez, that doesn't sound the funnest thing in the world. We salute you guys for the effort that you do for this, man. I always want to ask.
It's worth it.
It sounds very worth it. Is there a way that you like to pour the beer? Because this is one I'm like an idiot haze boy who always messes up. You already know where I'm going with this. Rousing the yeast and like, yeah, get it in there. I'm like, you're not supposed to do that with this style. Is there a I've got that much left in the bottle type of thing? Should I keep pouring? What's your suggestion?
That's really preference. If you add the stuff at the bottom, I usually call that the goods.
The goods, okay.
So if you add the goods, you're going to end up with a more intense flavor. You're going to pop the bitterness. You're going to pop the acidity. If that's what you want, you want it all at like dispersed across your glass. That's totally a cool way to do it. What I like to do is save about the same amount that you saved. You can see there, I've done that. And I'll pour 1 glass nice and clean, and then I will rouse it up and I'll pour a second glass dirty.
So then you get both clean and dirty.
So I really can see the difference between the two, and in doing so, the amount of sediment you get into that second glass is a higher proportion. So you kind of get 2 pretty different looks at it, which I always.
Okay, I love that. That's actually really smart because then you get 2 experiences.
You can pour the whole thing clean. If you want a full clean thing, just pour it carefully. Leave about a ½ inch at the bottom, and then you can ditch that if you want. I like to do this kind of 1 clean, 1 dirty method.
Okay, I love that. That's really smart.
So yeah, cheers.
Cheers. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. That is glorious. So
this is my favorite beer we've made.
Oh wow. Talk me through it, my guy. This is crazy. I'm still gathering my thoughts here, but I'm like, we've got the Gamay, so we've got wine vibes. We've got the blue plums. I know exactly the ones you're talking about.
Yeah. So this for us is like, for me at least, is like a glass of wine, it's got a little more richness because it's got a bit of a higher sugar load, just being beer. But it drinks to me like a Gamay, insofar as it's very fruity. It's got a little bit of a tannic structure to it, a lot for a beer, not a lot for a wine. And like sort of waves of fruit. So you obviously get the plums, but within the sort of matrix of the plum flavors, the mixed culture flavors, and the Gamay skins, there's all sorts of other fruits that you can kind of get impressions of in this beer, with like blueberries and cranberries, and there's some really nice warm spice in it as well that I really like. Sort of like a clove or mace, something you would use in baking. And then like a really long finish. It really sticks on the palate. And sort of that spice kind of lingers along with like some of the more delicate floral elements. You get some violets maybe, or blossoms, that kind of floral element. Kind of harder to put a very accurate word to floral characteristics, but I certainly get something like in the range of violet lavender on it, and that's purely from the fruit. There's no herbs in this.
Okay, that was like epically described, man. I got every single thing you're talking about in this. It was phenomenal. This is fantastic. It really is like wine. Like it's obviously it's got the wineskins on there, but there's something. It's kind of just like like a carbonated, chilled Gamay. It's
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like you can get in like northern Italy, you can get full strength carbonated red wines like Frizzante, and that's sort of where this falls into, at least to my palate. So we're very proud of it. There's a lot of work that goes into this. Like as I said, the processing of the plums is a huge amount of work.
Yeah.
But the blend, average age of this blend before going on to the fruit was about 14 months.
Okay.
Then it was on the fruit for 6 months, and then it bottle conditioned for 6 months. So average age of this beer in the bottle that you're drinking, or that if you go to the retail store and you buy, average age 26 months. So it's years and 2 months from when we brewed the beers that were in these barrels and to when you're drinking it.
Wow.
And so every step along the way, is a risk factor on our end. This can destroy whole batches. So sort of shepherding this over the course of more than 2 years is sort of the biggest challenge at our brewery, but also the most rewarding one. It's really, it's quite special to think that when we brewed the original threads of this beer, it was, summer 2020. It was complete chaos and like an entirely different world.
Literally.
And we are now finally kind of enjoying the fruits of that labor.
Literally and figuratively. That's interesting. Okay, so this is relatively indicative of the, like you were saying, with the can condition stuff. That's a second use. It's a few months all up, and you were mentioning it's about fivefold the work and the time for one of these barrel ages. Is this a pretty good comparison from that? The 26 months on average compared to
6 or 7.
Yeah. So this is what it really takes. So as far as your barrel, what's it called in French? They call it a shy. What's it called in English? Like a barrel room. How many barrels? I was trying to think. Whatever you got. I'm used to the Quebec thing. They call it C8, like chai, but I think they call it shay. Shay is how they pronounce it. So I always forget what it's called in English. Just a barrel room, right? I guess.
Yeah, you can call it a barrel room. You can call it an oak cellar. Our oak cellar is in the middle of our brewery, so it's a high risk situation. You can see them behind me.
Yeah.
So on my right is 2 of our. You can actually see 3 of our puncheons, and on my left are our lager tanks. So everything is under one roof.
And how many barrels are
Certainly
you
not
at
the
now?
ideal way to do things.
No, I guess
We've
not.
got 20. We've got 20 of these.
Okay.
So 20, and each of them these are large format barrels. So your standard wine barrel is about 225 liters, and these are all 500 liters. So over twice as big. So 20 of these represents 100 hex.
Okay, so that's a lot. That's pretty
Quite
reasonable.
a lot. Yeah, that's quite a lot.
Is there a reason you
It's
go on, please?
Go ahead.
Sorry, dude. No, please.
I mean, that is certainly more barrel space than we need for our annual production. But
Okay.
one of the things about starting up a barrel program is your best beer is going to be a blend of old beer, middle-aged beer, and young beer.
Okay.
And the problem with old beer is that you have to wait. And so if you're trying to put out a certain amount every year, you need more barrels than your production because you want some of these barrels to be 2 years old. So you just can't touch them. So, if we need 60 hex, that leaves us with 40 hex that we can allow to age for more than a year, which is sort of how we're building up complexity in our oak cellar.
And you've done that from the beginning.
Yeah. So we started with 12.
Okay.
Which was certainly more than we needed at that point. But we emptied all of them within the first year and a bit. And that's when it kind of became clear that we probably didn't need to empty all of them, but we needed to empty about 80% of them. So that's when it became clear that, getting to old beer was going to be difficult. So we found some... Every once in a while, puncheons show up from a barrel broker at like a really, really good price. And when the next time they showed up, we snapped them up and had them shipped to Niagara and went and picked them up and filled, 8 more. So we went from 12 to 20, and that has allowed us to sit on beer for 2+ years.
Okay. And why puncheons versus the regular barrels?
So basically, like as any vessel gets bigger, but this is especially important with wood vessels or any sort of breathing vessel, as the volume goes up, the surface area doesn't go up proportionally. So a bigger barrel has more of like kind of a center core of liquid that is not actually touching the edges. So you don't use twice as much wood for a 500 liter barrel as you do for a 250 liter barrel. And the result of that is that less contact with the wood means less oak impact on the beer, but it also means less oxygen impact on the beer. So if you took the same beer and you aged it in a barrique, which is the standard 225 wine barrel, and then aged some of it in a puncheon, and then aged some of it, let's say, in a 20 hectoliter foeder, the results of the beer would be dramatically different. The foeder would have the least acid, the least oak impact, and then the barrique would be the most of both of those. And so you would have a higher acid, higher oak component, and then you'd have a very little oak and lower acid component from the foeder.
Right.
For us, a puncheon is a nice middle ground. I love foeders. I would love to have some, but with our volume, we are real believers in blending as sort of the way you reach the kind of final product and consistency that we want. And, if we had a bunch of 10 hec foeders, blending becomes very difficult unless you're like comfortable taking half out and refilling it, which is not really how we do things. So with puncheons, we're able to make interesting blends without having too many small format barrels.
Which essentially plays to your space restrictions. Okay, smart.
And our target for acid. A small barrel. Every beer we've made in a small barrel has had much too aggressive an acid profile for our style. So we've played around with small barrels, and there are some characteristics of them that I like. There's some small barrels in this blend actually. but they do not stand on their own. They are imbalanced to my palate, and so whatever we've made out of those have been like a small percentage of a blend. They bring some extra acid and texture and intrigue, but they need to be split apart. A beer only blended from those would not kind of hit our quality mark.
Interesting. So, of this particular blend, what percentage would you say would be the regular barriques or barrels there?
25, 27.
Okay. That's more than I thought.
It's not nothing. It's not nothing, but that it was like honestly more than I initially was comfortable with. I think the results are good, but when we did decide on that blend, I was like a little on the fence that was too high a percentage.
Gotcha. And that was mostly because of the acidity component?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was a little worried that it would push the acidity too far, but it didn't. And the other thing I wasn't accounting for was like quite how much tannin we got from the plum skins.
Yes.
It's like enormous for a beer, and if you have a lot more tannin, you can balance out acidity and like soften harsh acidity a lot better because of the sort of structure that tannins bring. They cut things off before the acid sort of takes over.
Interesting. That's fascinating, man. Okay, I feel like I've never really had a conversation on here before about that. I've heard the word puncheon, but I didn't realize the size. It specified a 500 liters and versus the other size. So that is that's fascinating to me. Okay, so this particular one, for the little version of it, did that use both the Gamay skins and the plums, or was it just the plums?
You mean for the canned version?
For the canned version, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good way to talk about this. So as I was saying earlier in the podcast, we the canned versions are second use fruit. So we made a blend out of old barrel aged beers. It aged on the Gamay skins and the plums for 6 months, and then on the day that we determined it's ready and this is the day on the schedule to get the beer out, we brewed a beer a week in advance that was going to become Séance, which is its little cousin. And the moment we finished taking the beer off of the plums, we immediately started putting the new beer onto the used plums. So there's just no way, like if you imagine a plum that has been soaking in any sort of liquid, when you take the liquid off, that plum is still, but yeah, it's mush, but it's like totally suffused with whatever that liquid was. And like, there's a lot of character still left in it.
Right.
If you've ever, made some sort of like fruit wine, those cherries or whatever it is still taste like cherries. And so if they still taste like that, then you haven't really gotten all of the character out. So
Good point.
The second beer goes on and starts kind of drawing out all of that, latent remaining fruit character. And so what we get is a very interesting product that the fruit character is more like integrated into the beer. It's more delicate and it's more candied. There's a lot less like of a fresh fruit character. It's more like jams, jellies, candies. And so the best way I can describe it is like, this is a fruit beer. This like tastes like the fruit that goes into it. And the other ones are beer with fruit. It's sort of like the difference between drinking juice and drinking maybe like a natural seltzer with plum.
With the gotcha. Okay, so was there a reason you didn't include the Gamay skins in the Séance?
They're in there. No, sorry.
They are too.
I wasn't clear on that. So everything that was in the tank, which is the plums and the Gamay skins, is still in the tank when we put the second beer onto it. So the reason it's not really on the description of the beer is that the Gamay skins have been used twice by the time Séance goes onto them, because Rosewood used them first. and then we use them a second time for Violet Moon. By the time we get to the third use, they're not bringing much.
Gotcha. And so then technically this is like a third use, really.
Yeah.
But second use for the plums.
Exactly, yeah. So the plums have lots to give. The skins don't have much more to give, but they're not going to take anything away. They're in very good condition. They just are impossible to separate from the fruit.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean,
no way to separate the two, so we just leave them in there, and they're completely fine.
It's a pretty dope combo. Like I'm crushing this. This is glorious. I'm loving it, dude.
Awesome. Thanks.
I was thinking now as you were just talking then. I don't know if you really like do this, but do you consider, for example, this is Violet Moon 2022 version, and then Pale Fire 2021, and then 2022. Do you? Because I don't believe. I mean, obviously, I haven't checked on the bottle, but do you categorize them as such? Like, how does that really?
Yeah, you'll see the label, your Pale Fire label. It's subtle. So this is the first year we made Violet Moon, so we didn't put a year on it.
Okay.
But Pale Fire, this year we put a year on it, so you can differentiate it. So any of our original runs of bottles will be dateless, but 2022.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's great. Just for even, I was looking at the review and I was thinking, well, this is the 2022 Meerkat that I just had, and that would differentiate it from the last one that I had. And this is that, and I was thinking, oh yeah, Pale Fire. And I think some of the other beers I've had, and like you said, you do them every year, and the ones that aren't like your core range, like the IPA, the pills, and all that type of stuff, that does it obviously, consistently. But if you're doing these beers once a year, they're not going to be exactly the same because you're using so many natural ingredients, I imagine. So
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah,
it could just be like you categorize it. Oh, this is the Carry On 2022 version type of thing, which is great.
Yeah, you're gonna find more of that as well. With the we're not having it tonight, but we make a beer with red wineskins called Sang-Froid. That is like our closest collaboration with Rosewood because it uses both their wineskins and their honey. But we switch up which wine grapes are in it. So the first year was Cabernet Franc, the second year was Cabernet Sauvignon. This year we haven't locked down what we're going to do, but it will be a different grape.
That's dope. I didn't know that. That's really cool. The one, I think, I remember, like transparency, my brother works at Avling, and he brought like a magnum of Sang-Froid for New Year's, and it was lit. So that when you did the magnum, was that the first? I think that was the first run.
Yeah, big bottles. We did big bottles for both, but I think that probably would have been original.
The original version. Okay.
Hard to say. You'd know the label. The original label is Cabernet Franc, and the second label is Cabernet Sauvignon.
Oh, it says it already on it, so it's not even like a subtle.
It says on the description, like where here where it's like barrel aged, it'll say on instead of on Cabernet Franc skins, it says on Cabernet Sauvignon skins.
Gotcha.
So very different grapes.
Yeah.
But both like really beautiful wines coming out of Rosewood.
Yeah, man, it's very cool. I love seeing continually they work with breweries. It's I imagine yours too. But it's always been mine and Tiffany's favorite winery. Will and Ryan do some great stuff, and the food is now coming out of it. So it's just so cool that you're able to continue that relationship and explore now multiple beers with whether it's honey or
and the whole crew there is they're such good people. It's always a joy to visit and to work with them, and the product is
A1.
Fantastic. And the honey, I mean, like the wine is amazing. It's one of my favorite wineries in the country, but every time I have that honey, it blows my mind.
It's crazy.
And we have it a lot here. It's so unbelievably, it is actually inspiring in terms of what we were talking about earlier, with what we are trying to achieve with flavor, because it's like very dense and complex, but still really delicate. And like I've never had a honey that I can have a spoonful of and I'm not like overwhelmed by sweetness, like I'm able to with Rosewood. So it does kind of fall into that same realm of like it has all of the depth and complexity that you want without ever kind of being overwhelming or being too heavy-handed.
I couldn't agree more. We had a bunch of Tiff's family from the UK in over the weekend for Thanksgiving, and we made a charcuterie board, and of course you have the honey there, and they lost their minds over the rosewood honey.
Yeah,
It's
super
just,
good.
yeah, man, it's beautiful. It's just such a you're so right, and it is subtle whilst being so delicate, like that, the floral and all the different elements of it. I imagine, I don't know if it's the manufacturing on their side or if it's just the environment that they've got their bees in and stuff, and they've got all of the options, I guess, for the pollen. I'm not really sure how
I mean,
it works,
they've been like beekeeping for 80 years or something. It's third generation, starting in the Ukraine and then continuing in Canada. So
very cool.
I think it's expertise. I think it's technique. I think it's like, old world respect for the bees and what they need and what what you can get out of them if you treat them respectfully.
I love that. Are you? I imagine I know the answer, but I imagine you're a big fan of wine.
Yeah. I drink more wine than I drink beer. Certainly, I grew up drinking. Well, maybe not grew up, but my parents love wine. They're very knowledgeable about wine, so I've been very lucky to sort of be able to easily access high quality wine. And so that's always kind of been part of my life. And the older I get, the more I'm drawn to it, flavor wise. The I learn a lot about acid and structure and exactly what we're talking about. Flavor density that's not muddled. Those are the kind of things that try to find in wine, and that kind of are instructive as to how we're going to approach these styles of beers and really all of our beers. It's sort of my experience with. There are some exceptions to this, but with like really nice wines, like some of the nicest bottles I've ever had, again, are very confident to be subtle. There is a ton going on, but you never like kind of have your head blown back by it. It's very much like in control and taut. Like it's very tense and controlled. Coiled, I guess is another word for that.
I never thought of wine like that. I was going to ask, and you kind of answered it a bit, but how much does wine inspire your approach to beer?
A lot. At least as much as beer. There's some amazing brewers in Ontario that I've learned a lot from and that I take a lot of inspiration from. There are beers and breweries around the world that I vicariously kind of take inspiration from. But winemakers, flavors of wine are certainly what we're most inspired by.
I imagine that sort of shined through primarily through Firefly, if I'm not mistaken, was the first release from the barrel aged series, and of course that was
that's the wine, the beer on wineskins. That's like the most like clear expression of that. But as I said earlier, like this beer drinks like a wine, and that's sort of what we are shooting for. When we drink Pale Fire later, like I often describe that as drinking like a peach wine. There is no wineskins or anything in it, but in terms of like sort of how it lands on the palate, the lightness without being light flavor is sort of certainly inspired by wine, especially by like really densely flavored aromatic white wines that are just like an absolute flavor explosion while also being like very tightly wound and like clearly expressed while also being fresh and drinkable.
I like that a lot, man. Is that common, would you say, in beer to be that
inspired by wine?
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people making this style of mixed fermentation beer are inspired by wine. there's not that many breweries that are doing it, but it seems to be a common thread. Um, you see it expressed in sort of the usage of wine skins and wine grapes, but also in descriptions from breweries about which styles of wine they drink and how they sort of think of them when they make beers.
Mm. Does it inspire your non-barrel aged beers in any way, or at least the approach to them? Like, even as your Pilsner, your IPA, etc.
Yeah, it does. It's less. It's harder to sort of execute that in the clean beer because you just don't have as many levers to pull
Yeah.
with like a rich and diverse culture that you can make one part of that culture speak louder than others, and that helps you kind of play around with things. And acidity is a little more something you can actually dial in. But in terms of texture more than anything is something I think about obsessively with our beer, and that is a wine thing. Even like the most sort of like light and cheerful wines have enough like heft, enough texture on them to sort of give you something to grip onto, and it's something I think is present in most of the best lagers in the world. Is a sense of texture that the beer has weight without being heavy.
Hmm.
So that's certainly something we work on. But other elements, sure, we want things to be delicate, aromatic. We definitely embrace florality in a way that maybe not everybody does, because obviously florality is sort of a dangerous game. If you go too far, it becomes perfumed, and most people don't like that, myself included. But this is a floral beer. Our Pilsner is a floral beer. It's driven pretty strongly by floral aromatics, and we really love that. So that's another pretty common wine thing to have. Again, especially whites that have some really nice floral elements that integrate well with fruit to increase complexity, I guess, and sort of the freshness of aroma, because like nothing smells fresher than a flower.
It's very true. Never thought of it like that. Like floral pilsners, I feel like are fewer and further between, perhaps. But it's when you really
certainly here, certainly here, not in Germany. A lot of pills are yeast driven, and they tend to be a little more floral. Ontario is mostly inspired by Czech lager making, which is an amazing tradition. But Czech lagers are not driven as much, at least flavor-wise, by yeast. Like the yeast is working on the maltiness and like accentuating parts of that, but aroma-wise, a Czech lager is more driven by the smells of decoction and your malt profile and spicy hops than it is by yeast aromatics. German pilsners, many of them are like pretty yeast driven. You'd be surprised going across Germany how much you get floral, citrus, grass from yeast. Just a different style of pills. They've diverged like 150 years ago, and each has been kind of getting further apart as time goes on.
Interesting. I've still got it, man. That's like my next, major thing is to really now I sort of have the passion for the Crispies. I definitely want to go check it out there. I know you studied there in the last few years, so I want to learn more about those differences. But I have absolutely noticed the Czech obsession in both Ontario and Quebec.
With good reason. It's amazing beer.
I think did something happen with the Czech embassy where they were have some sort of program for brewers, because there were so many that physically went there.
Yeah, they have like a cultural exchange.
Cultural exchange, okay.
That they run with brewers to go to the Czech Republic, and that is certainly driving Czech beer in Ontario. So it's certainly successful for both. parties. So it seems like a really amazing program.
Yeah.
I don't. I know there's no German equivalent right now. I can't really imagine there will be, but I would really love more people in Ontario to, sort of have the opportunity to try fresh German beer, especially lager, but also fresh German Hefeweizen is like a revelation. It's a really special place for beer, and the so many different looks at pale lagers. Regionally and stylistically, there are just so many beautiful expressions of lager beer. It is definitely a bucket list item, or I would hope it's a bucket list item for anybody who's really passionate about lagers.
Your particular lagers, I guess they're mostly German inspired then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we make a couple Czech beers, but they are like made in a German style.
Gotcha.
So they're like, we make a what is the equivalent of like a Czech pale lager or a Czech templato. I can't pronounce Czech words well enough to attempt the
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Czech word for it, but it's a Czech templato, but it is made with a lot of German influence. So we kind of call it a Bohemian lager as a result, because Bohemia is like the border of the Czech Republic and Germany, and like historically has been part of both countries, has been its own thing. So now it's like definitively Czech, but historically Bohemia was sort of a transition land between German kingdoms and sort of traditional Czech lands. And so for us, that felt like the right title for it.
That's great. I know that was off topic.
Everything else we make is German.
Is more German style. Okay, sick. I want to segue on to I guess Séance would probably be the next one, right?
Yeah, let's do Séance. Yeah. I'm going to grab another glass so I can kind of do a side-by-side.
Yeah. All right, so this one, more beautiful artwork on this can. Look at that bad boy. With the purple, the pink, the orange in there. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, once again, this has got the plums and the Gamay with the beautiful gold end, as we call them in beer.
As we call them in the biz.
I'm paying attention, Brandon. I'm paying attention.
Yeah, I know. You always are.
Oh, don't mess around. Don't mess around, bro. Okay, so, and this one is, so the big cousin of this Violet Moon is 7.5, and this one, I didn't actually look at it, is
5.5.
5.5, okay.
Yeah. So it's lighter weight, certainly.
Lighter weight.
Color, you'll see that instead of that like deep sort of ruby purple color, you've got this like real nice pale.
Yeah.
It's sort of like a blush type of color.
Blush is a good way to describe it.
It's again, like there is no fresh fruit added to this beer, but I think when you smell it and when you taste it, the impression of plums is absolutely there. It's just, as I said earlier, it's like really integrated into the rest of the flavors, more candied, and we really love the result of it. This beer is just like a real crusher. You can really enjoy this without thinking about it, but if you stop, kind of slow down and start, nerding out over it, there's a lot of funky complexity going on, which is a good... that's pretty much what we're trying to do with this entire line of beers.
I love it. First of all, cheers, man.
Cheers.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, yeah, this is fascinating. So it's like, immediately, it's like just a straight up lighter version. Like, it's very similar in the characteristics. So, like, the Violet Moon is, like you said, like the tannins. That's like It's like drinking, like I think I said earlier, cold carbonated wine. Very similar, very upfront flavors. The wine is definitely like the wine skins are very upfront, complex and chewy. This right here is. It's like a. I don't want to say watered down because it's not it, but it's like a slightly more subtle version of it. I feel like the body is quite different. The body is like, I always like calling these type of beers like a chewy body. I feel like almost the chewiness is accentuated in Séance a little more, and that could, I'm not sure.
Interesting.
It also could be I'm sipping this. I've obviously almost wrapped up the bottle there, so I probably it's a little harder to compare directly, but I'm feeling like it's more like maybe it's more like that creamy carbonation where the Violet Moon is maybe
that's
a little.
how I would describe it.
Maybe that's what I'm getting. Yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, man, because you always got the words. It's your job.
I think chewy is a really good descriptor for sort of the density of Violet Moon. I think Séance is a little more like silken or creamy. It is full, but not chewy.
So then that one is okay.
Sort of being lighter on its feet, it drinks easier.
You're right. This is not chewy at all. You're right. Yeah.
It's but you're totally right that like there is like a texture to it. I just don't think it grips as much, which makes it just more of an easy drinking beer, which is sort of the goal. You get a lot of plum jam and a little bit of that warm spice on it, and real candied notes, which we're really sort of happy with.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm very proud of this beer. I think it's elegant, but it also smells like Welch's grape jelly, which is a very positive, nostalgic aroma for me. So you get all of these jam, jelly, candied flavors without really sacrificing complexity, because there is quite a bit of funk in there. There is some real sort of like earthiness from the Brett, and
I feel like it's got a decent acidity too. Spice.
Yeah. This is actually has a higher sort of impression of acidity than Violet Moon, because it's got less tannin.
Okay.
By a lot.
Right, so the tannin, sort of like you were saying earlier, kind of like camouflage that a little bit, but this doesn't have as much to hide behind. And it's the body, like I love the creamy body on this. Like it's interesting in comparison, like side by side. Like the chewy, I love that shit too. This is its own beast. Like it's if you didn't like, I wouldn't have known. I didn't realize before we were doing this that two of these beers were like the second use. I find that even more fascinating. And it's not like they're not like a sort of like, oh, this is like a lesser version. It's its own product altogether. It's its whole own thing that has that acidity. It has the body. Like you said, you don't have to overthink it. You can if you want, but you don't have to. It's very crushable. It's juicy. It's refreshing. Even with like, I guess you associate maybe that crisper, that carbonation or sharper carb with refreshing. But this to me is extremely refreshing, because red fruits to me are very refreshing year round.
I agree.
I feel like it could also, it feels Christmassy, like it feels holidaysy, both of the beers, because red fruits, I think cranberries and all those associated things that come with sort of holiday time, whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, or whatever.
Totally. And that brown spice for sure. Those are the spices that are in pumpkin pie and stuffing, and you get it in all sorts of Christmas meals. So
we go perfect with
nutmeg, clove, cinnamon type of vibe is a very changing of the seasons.
I really like this, bro. This is fantastic. I was
Thanks.
really
Yeah, we're really proud of this. We really think as you said, like it is its own product. We really consider the, used plums, plum pomace as a valuable ingredient. It's not trying to like squeeze blood from a stone. It is like a really like valuable ingredient. You try one of those plums from the tank after the transfer, it is like weird and delicious. It is like nothing else you've tasted because it is still a plum, but it's like carbonated and full of beer culture. Honestly, like if you get
wow.
one that like survived reasonably whole, you bite into it and it like it's like a pop rock. It
That's
like
cool.
buzzes when you bite it because like it is like inside of it has been like fermenting, so you do have this like trapped gas. So like I don't know, like a fruit that has become like a weird pop rock, jam. Sounds to me like a really cool ingredient.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a big reason why we really tried to focus on how we can use it effectively and get it to market effectively because it stands on its own as an ingredient, and that's sort of why the beer stands on its own.
I love it, bro. What's the response been to these two so far then, being that people can probably come in, whether it's a bottle shop or into the pub, grab both of them? Like, what's the vibe when people actually realize, like, hey, this is the big cousin, and this is the slightly smaller one, but don't underestimate that type of thing. And like, what's the vibe for this type of thing been?
Violet Moon definitely well received. We put a lot of it in kegs, and we're on the end of our last keg, so
Nice.
It moved very well. People were very happy with it. Séance was just released last week, so
it's fresh.
It is still new. It's fresh. People are reacting well to it. People love the can. The candles are really beautiful. We're very happy with sort of the design
Very cool.
of that. Over time, I imagine it will be an interesting conversation because we're going to run out of Violet Moon probably next week. And so Séance is going to be there to pick up that torch. And that'll be an interesting conversation to have, because it is so different, but it is so connected, both in process and in flavor.
Are you going to do Violet Moon again?
We already did.
Ooh. Oh, this wasn't the first time?
This is the first time, but we processed all the plums 3 weeks ago, a month ago now. The nice thing, and this is actually part of the reason why we have such a long fruit maturation time and bottle maturation time, is that it's on fruit for 6 months and then it's in the bottle for 6 months, which adds to a year. So we're able to actually release these beers in season. So we released Violet Moon in the middle of plum season.
Okay.
But it was last year's plums that are being expressed in this bottle. So we're always sort of like releasing these beers while we're making next year's version. So plums are in season, Violet Moon comes out, we get our plum shipment, we make next year's Violet Moon. Same thing happens with Pale Fire, same thing happens with Saint Clair.
Gotcha.
It's kind of a logistical challenge, holding onto these pallets for this long, but the result is like a much higher quality and complexity at release, where like you aren't encouraging people to sit on it for 3 months to like allow it to continue to develop. It's nice to release things
when they're ready.
You can obviously sit on it if you want to really accentuate your cellar characteristic, but we consider the beers ready when they're released if you imagine there's like a curve, and then like on that curve, there is like a line that is like the start of the sweet spot, and then it will continue to go up and then eventually start to crest. We try to release it like just past that start of the sweet spot.
Gotcha.
Which for us is about 6 months.
6 months in.
If we released it at 3 months, it would be fine, but we'd be saying like, it'll be better in 3 months.
Right.
At 6 months, you're into the range of it's subjective. Like if you want maximum fruit characteristic, you should drink it now. This is the best possible time for fruit characteristic. If you want more cellar characteristic, then sit on it. But you're into that like subjective. What is your preference? At 3 months, I think we'd be releasing it saying that like objectively it will be better in 3 months.
Gotcha. And is that tough for you to do that? Like to keep sitting on it, or you as the brewer kind of just feel better to be like, all right, guys, you're not having this yet. Like we're waiting.
Yeah, we feel better about it. It is tough. Like logistically, it's a challenge. You're also like spending a lot of money on something that you have to wait on a year before you see returns from. But both in terms of quality and in terms of sort of the identity and messaging of Avling, waiting a year is really a positive thing for us because it allows us to release things in season and talk about the fact that like 100% of this fruit comes from Beansville. So it's basically like 100 kilometers away. No purees, no extracts, no juices, just whole fruit from southern Ontario. So it's very nice to be able to highlight the ingredients while we're also releasing the beer.
I love that. I'm really glad you mentioned that because I was really going to bring up the 99. Which I believe is something that we spoke about on the last episode, but I think it warrants repeating. And I noticed on almost every can, or it could have even been every can that we had now, had this here, which is basically all your beers are made with 99% Ontario grown ingredients.
Meerkat would be the exception. Meerkat's not a 99 beer, but everything else we drank tonight is Ontario malts, Ontario hops.
Right here.
And then Ontario fruit.
So people can see that, right?
So there's that little 99 mark there. It's on a lot of our beers. It will tell you that, this beer is made. The 99 is there because, there are things like technical acids, water salts, that kind of stuff that like is just not made in Ontario. And so some of these beers are like 99.9 and others are like 99 on the dot. Some of them are probably 98.6, but all of them are like, statistically 99%. And we're quite proud of that. I thought at the beginning that I would not be able to do that, but over time we've just discovered some really amazing hop growers and amazing maltster that has really allowed us to move a lot of our beers into that 99% realm. It's not something we're going to do with the German lagers because it would just not be fitting to the style. But, we make an all-Ontario pale ale, Com C. We make an all-Ontario lager, Fallow Year.
Fallow Year, I love that one.
We're very happy with that beer. And
That's
then
good.
Almost the entirety of our barrel cellar and the majority of these cans are 99%.
Love it, man. Is that so? Obviously, that's important to you guys, and it's been something that you've been focused on from day one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like food systems are the like driving force. Like Avling is opened as a brewery, but not a brewery with a restaurant. It is like a brewery, a restaurant, and a garden. Like all three phases of business are like critical parts of the identity, and the connecting force and the connecting sort of ethos of all of that is food sustainability and just like talking and thinking about food systems. Like we just don't think about where our food comes from and how those systems work nearly enough. Food just arrives at the grocery store and then arrives at our home.
Yeah.
And so just kind of as many we can creating conversation about food systems and encouraging people to think about how to take part and support and nurture positive food systems that will, strengthen the quality, the health benefits, and the sustainability of agriculture in Ontario is sort of, that's how you could sum up Avling as a whole.
Okay. Is that lacking to, like, how important is that ethos in the sort of future of Ontario craft beer, or if you want to even take that to anywhere really, like those businesses using local produce to the point of where you are with 99% for a significant portion of your beers? Like, how important is that to sort of the future of the region and sort of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally know what you mean. I think ultimately it's a stylistic choice.
Okay.
I believe in it as, a positive thing to do, but it's not the only way to do things. I think going forward, though, environmental stressors on beer are going to go through the roof. They already are. The German and Czech hop harvest this year is catastrophic. There's like no other word for it.
Really?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
horrific. And these kind of stressors on Europe are increasing over and over again every year. And so the price, quality, and availability of European ingredients is going to be affected. There's going to be fewer things available, and they will be more expensive. So I think you'll see more American hops to start, and over time, though, there's like a golden opportunity in Ontario to increase our production of these things that will be needed in at scale. And you're seeing it obviously in the hop market, and very kind of slowly growing, a malts, like a more broad set of maltsters that are in Ontario. I don't think it's like an imperative for any brewery to do this. Like, it is a stylistic choice. If your preference is to make, all Czech beers or all German beers or all hazies, like I think there's a lot of runway for that. But I do think there are going to be environmental and financial stressors on all breweries here that will at least cause people to think about how they can reduce the cost of their raw ingredients coming in, and the easiest way to do that is to get them from home.
Okay. Without going too far into it, this is the first I've heard about the hop harvest in Germany and Czech Republic. What, like, does that mean that Saaz and other noble hops that are typically used in lagers and pilsners from the regions that are very heavily recreated in North America and beyond, are those hops going to be in short availability?
Yes.
As of okay, and we can't grow them here,
like
right?
this, not in Ontario. Certain German varieties maybe, but when you're growing hops in any region, you need to basically the first differentiator, the first test it has to pass is disease resistance, and we have like a fairly wet environment comparative to a lot of hop growing regions. So there are only certain varieties that have enough mildew resistance, for example, to happily grow in Ontario. Saaz is not one of them, as far as I know. Okay. But yeah, in terms of noble European varieties, like Central European varieties, like the German and Czech hops, I don't have sheets in front of me, but the numbers I have heard are like, a reduction in harvest between 20 and 50%, depending on variety and region.
And that's essentially, without being hyperbolic, is catastrophic to the kind of global craft beer industry.
To the global beer industry.
Beer industry,
noble
period.
hops are like a critical part of many industrial lagers. Pilsner Urquell uses a lot of Czech Saaz. And so, if the Saaz harvest is down a significant amount, Urquell is going to get their hops. They're the most important buyer. They're first on the list. So,
right. So they'll be good.
If there is a reduction, that will be felt more strongly by small breweries.
That's terrible news. So,
it's the reality of climate change. Is Europe is having catastrophic heat waves every year. And farming, like, it's one thing to try to survive through that as a person, but imagine trying to survive through it as a farmer.
I've heard some stories.
You just don't get any rain.
Yeah,
you don't get rain. It's a drought. It's like biblical stuff. It's not
crazy. Yeah. So then, breweries that heavily rely on, whatever Czech, German style pills, it's like, breweries that do a lot of crispy boys. Like, do they have to maybe switch up so like that whilst nobody's really screwed because there's always going to be sort of hops, but maybe it's just not the hops that you need? Would that mean that, like you sort of mentioned, they would have to pivot to be like, well, instead of Saaz, I'll use the closest North American noble hop that would mimic it?
Yeah. You can. It is catastrophic, but it's not like there's no Saaz. Price will be up, quality will be
like middling,
harder to guarantee. We are transitioning a few of our German lagers away from being majority European hops for this reason.
Okay.
The outlook on North American hops is not as bad. So we found a really beautiful Yakima hop. I was just out in Yakima a couple weeks ago selecting.
I saw that, yes.
And one of the things we were doing is selecting for a replacement hop for a Pilsner.
Ooh. And
it's not going to replace all the hops in it. We still have some European hops, but
it's going to reduce that.
The character coming up of this hop, and it's a very sustainable hop. It's super disease resistant, it's drought resistant, and it has high yield. So going forward, that's going to be a critical part of our Pilsner. And if we like it, and if we feel like the, identity specific characteristics of our Pilsner can be maintained with a majority of North American hops, we will probably move that way. It's less shipping impact, less CO2 footprint, because a lot of these hops are require significantly less spraying. And that is like the spraying is an enormous CO2 footprint because creation of those chemicals is very CO2 hungry. So if we can kind of reduce these sort of environmental factors while maintaining quality and guaranteeing supply, it sort of feels like the move. That said, like, you can just buy Saaz. It's going to be available probably at a higher price. It's probably going to have a lot of high quality Saaz, but you're projecting 5 years down the road. Maybe there are improvements technologically to mitigate environmental stress, but maybe not.
And so that means it's going
to insulate yourself.
Yeah, you're right. And maybe there's going to be a whole lot of expensive Pilsners coming out next year, maybe.
Wow. Yeah.
We shall see.
Maybe. But it's hard to charge a lot for a Pilsner. You just end up eating a higher material cost.
Which I've heard from other breweries about other styles, to be honest. And like Haze breweries have told me the same thing, which I was kind of surprised about. I thought the Haze people, of all things, would be more down to sort of like cool bro, whatever it takes. But Crispies are a different. I don't know. I feel like they've kind of really established themselves as being like a real solid thing. From what I can tell in the beer community, people are really, like me personally, I love Pilsners. Every time I see Brad, I'm like, can I get me something in Pilsner, bro? Like it's what I would go for more than anything else. Like, my girlfriend's cousin, he's from the UK. He works for us. All the family from the UK were over, so he still lives in Montreal. he's going to move over, but they went to Silo in Montreal, and even like my girlfriend's uncle brought me back some Silo beers because he knew I sent him there, and he brought me back because he knew how, so like I'm loving that. So that's why I'm asking all these questions, because I don't want to see that gravy train cut off, here in I feel like we've got some beautiful stuff happening in Canada, period, but particularly Ontario and Quebec, and at least like you said, there's a way around it that you found. I did see on social that you did go out there. How was it all, man? I don't know if you want to go. Don't have to go too deep, but great trip.
Oh yeah, selection is pretty special. I've been in the industry for 10 years. The first time I've gone, so it was very exciting personally for me. But yeah, it's pretty special just to see the size of the operation, the expertise, the professionalism of the operations, and to kind of get a little more connected to the product. As with what I was talking about at the grocery store, hops just arrive as pellets at breweries, ours included, and you understand and respect them, but it's sort of a different process to go there and see them going from the field into processing, and then kind of being at a table and having them put down for sort of cuts of the same hop from different farms, different pick days, and you can just like sensory assess their qualities and which hop you think fits your beer best. So it really kind of connects you to your ingredients in a pretty special way. It was it was a very positive experience.
That's awesome. I imagine for people like yourself, brewers that are very just passionate. You're a very passionate dude about what you do, and I imagine that would just be like crazy to go out there. I've seen those videos with those like whatever it is in the warehouses where there's like it's like a football field of hops, like in those whatever it is in that little thing. I guess is where they get dumped in. Just crazy, man.
Yeah, they're moving them with like construction equipment. It's like a backhoe. It's just like scooping hops. It's
crazy.
Like, that is like the overflow. It's like the backhoe is dealing with spillage. Like whatever the automated machines spill, you need a construction vehicle to shovel up. Like the scale is mind-boggling. Like we contract with only one company. They're gonna do something like 12 million pounds this year, and it's a bad year.
Jesus.
So yeah, the scale of it is very impressive.
It's probably, you see a 12 million pound, you're like, whoa, that's massive, but it's probably really massive when you're actually there and see 12 million pounds.
Yeah.
You're like, Jesus.
Yeah, Christ. I mean, yeah. You think you see 12 million pounds. Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, this is 1% of 12 million pounds.
And you're like,
and that's when your mind really expands. Yeah.
And then that is a bad year. Jeez,
yeah,
man.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Something else.
Very cool though. It's something I've never. I mean, obviously I have no reason to do it, but just to go and hang out and see the shit, like maybe next year.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing to see.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of fun. And then they must have events and stuff. And I know that I saw a whole bunch of breweries from Ontario specifically out there. And I was like, all right, so a lot of folks out here are really like, taking the time. I know you're all very busy. To be able to go out there and spend some time and meet other folks and do the rub and all that stuff. So that's pretty dope. I think that's a really good sign. I'd be curious to see what you think about that. But like, I feel like it's a great sign for, just call it Ontario for now, but say Ontario craft beer, where so many breweries are investing in their team, or at least the head brewers or whatever, to go out there, meet the folks, like you said, shake some hands, smell the hops, and be like, this is what I want for our products for 2023 and beyond. That's just something very, very cool about that. That like, that's how much you're willing to put in. It's not just like go online and go, yep, give me X bags of that. Like, you're like, no, I'm going to go and spend thousands of dollars on a flight and hotels and food, and then travel, and then go, because you fly into San Francisco from what I understand, or something like that. Is that right? Or is it?
It's usually Seattle or Portland.
Oh, okay, so it's further north. Okay,
you could fly into San Francisco. It'd make like for a long but like spectacular drive. But most people go into either Seattle or Portland.
Gotcha. And then you've still got to go to the various
West Coast.
it's total West Coast. Yeah, the PNW. I've had a few of the hop farmers on before, so they've sort of explained it a bit more to me, but it's still fascinating to hear the experience of sort of what you actually do. But either way, I guess what the point is that a lot of Ontario breweries are really putting their money up to send people out there to hand select the product so that it's the best it can possibly be for what they're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's expensive to go out, that no doubt. But you know, if you're not selecting hops, you are accepting a lower quality. I've done it for years. It's like something you can absolutely do, and still make good beer. But you're going to get higher quality ingredients by a long shot. By selecting and going out helps with that. It really helps you kind of assess the hops in the freshest possible at the freshest possible point. And over the course of a year, you know, the extra money you put into selection, flights and hotels and whatever, versus the amount of money you spend on hops, you know, there's a lot of value there. You know, if all your hops are 25, 30% better than if you spent a couple $1,000s for that at the beginning, I think most people would say that was worth it. Most people would pay an extra $10 a pound to know they had the better hops. And so over the course of the year, that's what that adds up to.
Gotcha. That's smart. When you look at it like that, this is kind of, to really, and I feel like that's, it's almost like a deeper connection. Obviously, you already have a deep connection to the beer. If anyone's heard for the last hour and a half, we've been talking. You're a passionate guy, and you've always been since I've known you. This almost takes it to another level because there's no equivalent for malt or yeast of this end of year where everyone goes out to this region and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? There's no like malt, fucking, what do you call it? Like pilgrimage to go and get, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really all about hops. And
not in the same way.
Not in the same way, no. So it's like, there's something about that. I've enjoyed watching, you know, following along with a lot of breweries who are out there and doing their stuff. And it's very encouraging and very exciting.
It's certainly one of the most special things you can do as a brewer, honestly. It is like, it's just such a cool thing to be part of. It's such a good trip. There's just so much, like it's like that perfect intersection, that Venn diagram of work and fun. And it like kind of reignites passion. Yeah. I found my passion for brewing certainly was you know, amplified by going out there.
I love to hear that, bro. That's amazing. On that, shall we hit the next one?
Yeah, can I got to hit the head first.
Yeah, mate, do it up. And, I'll keep people chatting. Yeah, take your time. So, this is super cool, guys. I am loving this. Like I said, this is we know Brandon. For people who don't know, my brother Notion, who does all the audio engineering for us, so he works in the bottle shop at Avling. So go say hi to him. He's a champion. We met Brandon in 2017 at Lalo Brewery when we did our first ever collab for my brother's album at the time. It was called Heart on My Sleeve. And then we did a beer called Hops on My Sleeve. And Brandon was, he was, what's the word, consulting, I guess, for Lalo, helping them improve their processes and get all their beers, you know, they started to brew in-house a bit more. And shouts to Dan and Colin. Brandon was helping them out. So I met Brandon I knew Dan and Colin, so met them through them. We were doing my brother's album launch at Lalo. So then we did the beer for it, which was super, super cool. So I've known Brandon since then, and you know, followed him through his career as he went from indie to consulting there, then he went to Godspeed and then on to Avling. And yeah, these beers are just so well made. They're just so like, if you hear the way Brandon's talking, you know that he's very passionate about what he's doing, and he takes everything very, very seriously. He studied in Germany. He's you know, really taken the particularly this barrel aged stuff that we're really focusing on tonight very seriously. So it's really cool, like to try these beers, and then like the little cousin of it. So the next one, I imagine, we'll probably do the Pale Fire, which is the peach one. Which this is the 2022 version, which I'm excited about because this was my favorite beer that they ever did. I'm not sure maybe it's this one. peach. Could be the Firefly. I actually had Firefly. My brother hooked me up with that recently. It was fire. But I didn't know that this was what it was. So I got to double check exactly what's going on. But I just find the stuff is really interesting, and just consistently unique, particularly in this realm that we're talking about tonight. So good timing. I just had a pause in my monologue.
Perfect.
What are we doing, bro?
Let's for fun. Let's go backwards. The other way on the peach ones. Let's go.
Firefly.
Let's go Firefly, and then we'll go up to the big cousin.
I'm here for it. Now, for Firefly, I swear I had this in like January or something. Is this the second?
This is the second. Yes, this is the second time we've done Firefly.
Okay.
So like with these fruit beers, for every time we do one, one pale fire, we get one Firefly out of it. And
gotcha.
For every time we do one violet moon, we get one Séance out of it. So this is our first round of violet moon, so it's our first Séance. But this is our second round of pale fire, so this is our second Firefly.
Love it. Is it much different to the original of Firefly in comparison? Because I know you said Pale Fire is changed. Has this changed?
Yeah. Yes, it has. Yeah. So, again, I would say the fruit is more candied than last year.
Okay.
I'd say it's more integrated as well. We changed the aging breakdown on it, so there's more time on peaches pale fire before Firefly goes on.
Okay.
Firefly's on the peaches for the same amount of time, but it happens later. So the result of that is sort of we have both increased the complexity and like fresh fruit characteristic on pale fire. Okay. While accentuating the candied characteristic of Firefly. So I think both beers are improved and more representative of our goals on both of these.
Okay.
As a result, we've been able to push them a little further apart from each other. Where last year Firefly was probably closer to pale fire than was ideal for our goals.
In what sense? So, like, you do like to have them a bit more of just spaced out.
We would like distinction between them, and we really like that sort of like confected fruit characteristic.
Okay.
So, by sort of playing with the aging profile, we were able to increase the confected characteristic in Firefly, and that makes it taste more unique as compared to, or like, in comparison to pale fire.
Interesting. All right. Well, bro, cheers.
Cheers. Get it in you.
You said it before me this episode. Well done. Oh yeah, this is great, man. So this just to confirm again, this also has citrus zest in it.
Yeah.
And
so that's just part of the original. It's a small amount that was in. The way we deal with our oak cellar is not that, like, we brew pale fire into 4 barrels, and then after a year we take those 4 barrels and make pale fire. We fill the barrels with all sorts of things. And we're trying to make sure that, like, we have as many unique barrels as possible. And then we go back into the barrels and we find our beers. So sort of our high-level categorization is in colors. So we have some barrels that we know reliably create, like, yellow and orange flavors. Okay. We have other barrels that reliably create red and blue flavors. So when we go to make Violet Moon, the first thing we taste is those barrels that we know usually make red and blue flavors, like, blueberry, sweet tart, grape, cherry type flavors. When we're trying to blend something like pale fire, we're looking for barrels that give us citrus characteristics, that give us peach, that give us apricot, pineapple, those kinds of things. So the citrus zest in this case is because one barrel that was sort of part of the production of this beer had a little citrus zest in it.
Okay. So then,
So
technically,
it's like way less than 1% of the total weight of dry ingredients, but it's still an ingredient in there. So we decided to list it.
I like that. That makes complete sense. It's actually kind of cool doing it this way, like back to back with Séance, because I'm getting that same creamy body that we were talking about earlier. In this one, with this, you're right, like a candied peach. I feel like peach has got to be one of the top 3 adjuncts for beer. I don't know why. I just personally,
people love peaches.
Yeah. Big fan. This works incredible with it. I love that it's sort of like opaque, so it kind of like it gives that feeling that it's like this fruit. Like fruited sours are never really clear for the most part. Like like you were saying, your bottled stuff is a lot, if you don't include the bottom part, a lot more clear. There's something where Séance and this are very opaque, so it just really feels visually juicy. I'm not sure if that's if it's misrepresenting itself on my palate, but I'm really getting like this really creamy body with this juicy candied peach. It's but it's still, once again, subtly confident, which is fantastic.
That's the goal. I think that, again, like leaning into nostalgia, like I stick my nose in this and I get like peach juice and fuzzy peaches.
Yeah, that's
like,
really what it is.
Definitely the like more confected candied aromas, which honestly, like for me as like a brewer, has been fascinating because like I don't know why that is. I just know that it is. That the second you use fruit, we end up with these candied, more like refined fruit. And I don't mean refined like cutting down. I mean like it went into some sort of like food process, refined.
Right.
I can't speak to what is happening biologically and chemically, but it's consistent across 3 different fruits like wineskins, plums, and peaches. Each time we get these candied notes, which I love. It's just fascinating and interesting, and like a really cool different flavor palette. It's been a journey that way. It's been very interesting and instructive to sort of listen. Like we do talk about a lot in the barrel age and the mixed fermentation beer, is you have to do a lot more listening and negotiating. Versus the clean beer, you sort of like tell the yeast what to do, and you give it very clear walls and a clear box in which to operate. And if you do that, it will consistently create the same flavor. The barrels are alive, and there are just so many voices involved inside because of the many different organisms that the idea of telling it what to do is sort of folly. I think the approach that has worked best for us has been to nudge it in the right direction, understand what it needs, but also listen and really like use our palates and use our knowledge to guide it rather than direct it. And so in terms of this beer, that's been like definitely, as I said, we changed the aging profile because the first year we did this, we wanted to see what would happen if we tried to push the fresh characteristic in pale fire, and the result has been this like amplification of the candied characteristics in Firefly. So it's certainly a happy accident on our part. It's not like I had a perfect master plan, but I had experience and like a decent hypothesis, and we chased it, and we're seeing the results now.
I'd love to see that, bro. So from the one I would have had in January to this batch, what would you say are the differences?
This is less acidic. Like I said, more candied. It has like a longer last on the palate, but it's also lighter bodied.
Interesting. Okay.
It is, it's like full of flavor, very juicy, but also just kind of like drinks crisp. Like it's a crispy boy fruited sour.
Crispy boy fruited sour. I love it. This is, yeah, man. I mean, 5.5, so it's, it's still super light, very crushable. Very simple, like as far as the characteristics of the Séance. I don't know why I'm getting a lot of those same thing. I feel like, unless I'm sort of like it's same things as far as like the body and the, like you were saying as well, like you got the candied plum and the wine skins, and now the candied peach. It's sort of like definitely seeing a lot of that, having it back to back. I don't know if I would have felt like that if I didn't know exactly all the information you just told me.
Yeah.
But
hard to say. I would say that, like the production process that yields Séance is very similar to the process that yields Firefly. So we've sort of learned, like I said earlier, like we've learned the style of brewing required to for the beer to sort of mature in a couple months versus a couple years or 1 year. And so we follow that same set of rules making both Séance and Firefly. So a lot of the elements you're tasting have to do with what we've done in the brew house and like how our culture reacts to that. So you're going to get definitely like thematic, like you're getting a theme that connects all of these kind of second use fruit beers and more broadly, all of these canned sours, because like a huge amount of flavor is being driven by that living culture. And depending on the type of food that we give to it, we just get a different result.
I love it. And once again, the response to this, has this been similar to Violet Moon and Séance as far as people? I mean, Pale Fire has been out a bunch longer, being that this was the second.
Yeah. So yeah, this being the second has been, there's been a good chunk of people who know what it is and are happy to see it back. So we're seeing pretty good pickup on this. Cans are moving well, kegs are moving well, but we'd love to see this in the hands of more people, because I do think that it's like a unique product, and I think, as with a lot of our goals, I think this is sort of a success insofar as like you could probably give this beer to somebody who isn't a sour beer drinker or isn't a beer drinker, and have a decent chance that they're gonna like it. And that's sort of what our broader goal is to just sort of widen the sort of general perception of what sour beer can be. That, if you want something that is really sour and intense and sour and intense is the best way to describe it. That's available, and there's a lot of good producers who make beer in that style, but it's not the only way to make it, and you can have sour beer that is a little more approachable and delicate and has some more sort of like cocktail and wine characteristics that maybe give it a wider audience.
Yeah.
And those are the beers we're striving to make.
I love that, man. You mentioned, like, I really feel like white wine drinkers would love this. I remember I can't remember which winery, but there's some winery in Niagara that does peach wine, and I got it years ago, and Tiff's been on me for drinking it because I don't drink wine enough. I drink basically just beer. So she's like, man, drink this damn wine that you've had for ages, because you're supposed to get this peach wine and mix it with their sparkling. It was like this thing that they did. And I remember bought that, like got them both. It's like Q or Consummate or something like that. So peach wine is a thing, and peach is obviously a residual flavor in a lot of the white wines that are offered, that
Absolutely.
throughout Niagara. So I feel like this is a type of stuff that would absolutely appeal to a whole bunch of people, even if they're not, like you said, not beer drinkers, but they are into white wines. This is approachable, inoffensive, not overly acidic. Like, I feel like this must have a similar acidity level than some white wines, I imagine, or maybe a touch more.
Yeah, that's a complicated.
A complicated question.
Acid is like really interesting. Yeah, like wineries will measure acid by titration,
Okay.
which gives you a more accurate measurement of the actual like impression of the acid versus something like pH. We don't titrate. We don't see the value in it because of sort of the style of beer we're making, and in wines, like the level of acid is like directly connected to the level of sugar, and a certain amount of acid is important for ageability, and in certain wines it's like a lot. It's like much more of a balancing act between sugar and acid. For us, that's not really how it works. So we don't need to know that information, and I'm a big proponent of the fact that like you should have all of the data that you need, but it's easy to just imagine that you should get more data because data is good, but too much data that you're not using is just noisy. You just end up wasting a lot of time tracking things that like don't give you answers. And so something like titratable acidity is not something we sort of need at this point in our brewery's life. So I all that to say, it's an overly complicated way to say that I have no idea what the comparative acidity of this versus a white wine. It's certainly a different acid profile, but you do get a lot of like pretty intensely acidic white wine, so it's certainly not out of place.
And have you seen that? Like, have you seen people converted yourself in the brewery at all? Like, people come in like, oh yeah, I don't really drink beer. I'm a wine drinker. What do you got?
Yeah, we get a lot of that. Yeah, we're able to pitch our barrel aged beers to a lot of people who drink wine, and more these sort of the canned quicker sours are having the same effect. Yeah, it's definitely something you can pitch to people who traditionally don't like beer, because largely of like what the major beers available, and that's like a industrial lager, or if they've tried craft beer, it is likely a very hoppy beer because that's the dominant style. It's a style I love, but certainly not a style for somebody who is like on the fence about beer. Someone who is made like a maybe on beer, you probably don't want to serve them a double IPA. It might be not good.
Probably not the best
for where they are in their palate. Yeah.
Do you know what's funny though?
Probably not the best pairing.
I agree with the double IPA. I remember being in New York with with Tiffany's friend, who's a wine drinker. She doesn't really drink beer, and I was drinking other half. And she was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Why does it look like that?" And I explained to her what it was, and she took a sip of it, and she thought it was amazing. So I feel like New England IPAs, because of people associate hops with bitterness, like West Coast, bitter, resin, dank type of thing. But then when they actually try in New England, like, oh, all right, so it can taste like mangoes and pineapples and tropical fruit in a certain way without the acidity that a sour would have. Whilst I would imagine that this type of beer would align a lot. Like, while she really enjoyed that, and I thought that was just an interesting anecdote, I think this is very similar to what they're already drinking. So it's sort of less of a stretch, and it's just not that, like, it's interesting. You'd think that, oh yeah, this Pilsner, this craft Pilsner is just like, the other, fizzy yellow water that you're used to seeing and thinking about as beer. Doesn't always get them over the line if they don't already, drink the macro stuff. So there's a lot of value in this.
Yeah, I mean, I say this like with love, but Pilsner is like a beer flavored beer.
It is.
Um, and if you like beer, that's great. And I love a Pilsner, like nothing else. But I'll be the first to admit that it tastes like beer. And if you don't like the taste of beer, you are not going to like the best Pilsner in the world.
Nope.
It's still going to taste like beer.
It's true.
But something like this sort of stretches the expectation of what beer tastes like. So you could probably pitch it to somebody who doesn't like beer.
No question. And I feel like it would convert, which is, it really, like, I don't know if it gets really talked about it much. I try to bring it up here as much as possible. I think it's super valuable. I think it's a really, like, key thing to talk about, like, gateway beers, because if this industry is going to grow and we all want all of this to continue to thrive and get bigger and better, we need more people purchasing the products. And
I
one
agree.
way,
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, we need a wider audience, like the widest audience possible, because a small audience is great. They can be very passionate, and the people who have supported craft beer for years are unbelievably passionate and are the reason the industry's around. But you just never want your business to be reliant on a niche group, and the biggest craft beer fans are a niche group. They're amazing, but there are just not that many of them, and you don't ever want to alienate them because they are like the best customers you can have, but they can't be your only customers because there are so many breweries and they can only be in one place at one time. You certainly want to try to grow the number of people who are interested in actively seeking out craft beer, and also where those people come from. What their upbringing was, financially, culturally, what type of job they hold. You want that to be a very wide-based representative of a city like Toronto or a city like Hamilton or Montreal. It's best for everybody to just be connected to as many people as possible.
100%, man. Yeah, it's an interesting time to be in beer, I imagine. Being that I feel like I've heard things that beer isn't growing right now, but I also feel like the last 2 years were sort of skewed so heavily that I don't even know if it's really fair to say that. You got the introduction of seltzers that we're fighting against, which I don't know. I guess we're coming out of the summer. I don't know how much seltzers dominated or not. I didn't see every other brewery doing one, so I don't know if that's the case. It's going to change this camera battery. Can you hear me still?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. But it really just seems that the probably the most undervalued segment of the craft beer market, at least overall that I see getting talked about, are the sort of people who we're converting. And we need as many opportunities to convert people as possible. I would argue, I've seen at Avling, I've been there, I've checked out, say, what's happening on the patio. I feel like I'm seeing there we go, beautiful, a pretty wide range of humans on the patio there. I feel like you guys are getting a pretty, maybe it's your location, maybe it's the kitchen. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a big driver of that is the kitchen. Our chef grew up in Hong Kong and Hawaii, and
Cool.
Her food is really influenced by her upbringing and her story. And so the resulting food is unique for a brewery, and I really believe that in the true sense of the word. I don't know any other brewery that has food like this.
Right.
Because it's this Mix of Hong Kong as a melting pot and as a traditionally Cantonese place. with all of the Polynesian influence of Hawaii. And the result is that we, have these interpretations of, traditional Chinese comfort food, for example, that show up on our menu. And that connects us to, strongly to, a very large Chinese and Southeast Asian population in Toronto. Who may or may not be into beer already, but are, in our experience, traveling to try these interpretations of the food because it's connected to their history and their story as well. And then they're getting introduced to the style of beer that we make. And, in the inverse, we have a bunch of people who come for the beer because they like German lagers, because they like sour beers. And then the menu is significantly different than they expect. But now they're being introduced to, food in a way that they, don't see every day. So it's a really nice, intersection of influences based on a largely European beer inspiration and a largely Southeast Asian and with some Polynesian influence food. You have two parts of the world that historically have totally different stories to tell.
So the food itself is really attracting a diverse and sort of new crowd that may not know much about craft beer, but they've heard about the food. So that's also
we do get a lot of people who come for the food who are very into craft beer.
Okay.
But we also get people who are not, and this is their first introduction to craft beer via the food because that's what drew them in.
I love that though, Mo. That's something that I don't think I've ever really spoken about here much, as far as how food can convert drinkers, which I think is extremely important. That's fascinating.
And pairing opportunities are very interesting for us as well because we make all these beers that have floral elements and fruit and earthy and all of these characteristics that come from these long aged beers, which are all flavors that are sought after and an important part of Chinese cooking. You have way more earthiness and way more floral characteristics, and umami is a foundational part of the cuisine. And so it's an interesting thing to be able to pair because some of these elements are not as present in European food or North American food.
Right, and at typically at brew pubs, you would kind of get more either European basic dishes or burgers, pizzas, things like that.
Yeah.
That wouldn't always sort of attract a different crowd that might not be exposed to craft beer before, which I think is the important part.
I think that's the important part too. And just from an intrigue level with regards to flavors, it's just very interesting to try to figure out how these beers fit into a totally new cuisine. Because with wine, you can find pairings for foods way out of the wheelhouse for French wine. Most French food and French wine develops side by side, and so the food and the wine echo each other. But it doesn't mean it has to be that way. You can absolutely pair French white wine with Thai food, for example. That's a challenge, but it's possible. It's an interesting challenge.
Right.
We feel the same here, is that we have all these new flavors and new, conceptions of balance that come via the, really technique-driven Chinese food. And so we have all this new palette to work with, where these flavors show up that we can play off of that we don't normally see in North American food.
Does the food in the kitchen ever inspire the beer, or has it yet?
It's sort of, yeah, it is starting to. So we spent a reasonable amount of time not using any adjuncts, so fruit, grain, that kind of stuff, like a flake grain or whatever from outside of Ontario. Over the last year, we've realized that, like, you know, the motivation for that was to highlight Ontario, but we have been able, through like the amazing producers we're connected with, make all of these 99% beers. So we feel like we have that sort of as like a centerpiece of our beer program, and so we've decided that we'll play around with some ingredients that come from elsewhere in the world, and some of the inspiration for that has been from the kitchen. So we've got some beers coming down the pipeline that are using Southeast Asian ingredients in this line of mixed fermentation cans. So those will come out
Very
sometime
cool.
next year.
Man, that's awesome. I love to hear that. Do you want to jump on the final one, rock the pale fire, and we'll
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah,
wrap it up just to get that comparison? So,
Yeah.
excited for this one. The 2022, this one, barrel aged blend with peaches, 6.7%. Just a glorious beer. Dude, what is the difference between the 2022 and the one we had in the last podcast?
So our fruit quality was higher,
Okay.
better year for peaches. We learned a little more about how we're going to process the peaches as well, like when we need to get them from the farm and how we need to process them when they come in the door. So our peaches were riper, and we got just more weight of peaches. We had to sort a lot the first year, and we had to sort less this year. So more peach character. We let it age on the peaches longer. We had better beer to blend with because we had more old beer, and we had more of a wide palette to sort of play with. So the blend we created had more complexity and had a better sort of balance of acid and bitterness that we think is like in the right place to accentuate the peaches.
Okay.
But past that, it's the same. Insofar as it's like a blend of barrels, sort of like discovered in the cellar and aged on roughly 1,800 pounds of Ontario donut peaches for 6 months, then bottle conditioned for a minimum of 6 months before release.
What's a donut peach? That sounds amazing.
Probably seen them at some point in a grocery store. They're really common in Chinese grocers. They're a peach, but they're like squished down. They're sometimes they're called Saturn peaches. Or flat peaches. So they're really only about this tall, but they look like the rings of Saturn, I guess, or they look like a donut.
Interesting.
It's a peach that has like more character. It's like sweeter and has more like actual flavor characteristics to it. I love an Ontario, like a standard Ontario peach. It's one of my favorite things in the summer. But the definitive character of that is sweetness, and when we ferment, we lose that sweetness. So regular peaches can be a big challenge. You put a lot of them in the beer, and they don't taste like peaches. But donut peaches give you a much more aggressive peach characteristic.
Interesting. Man, this is great. I had no idea. All right. Cheers, bro. Oh, man, so good. So, comparing these two side by side, they are quite different.
They are. So the goal of what we're doing with Pale Fire, or at least with any of these fresh fruit beers, is I think it's best represented in Pale Fire. Is we're like, when you eat a whole peach, you get a different flavor from the skin than you do from the flesh, than you do from the juice, than you do from like the sort of hardened part that's near the pit.
Okay.
Biting right through. There are like sort of different stages of flavor if you just eat the peach from the outside in. And when we make pale fire, the goal is that you can hopefully taste all of that within your sip. So you can taste that the skin is a little more bitter, that the flesh and the juice are where like the acid and the sweetness are, and that when you get close to the pit, and maybe your teeth kind of scrape against that pit because you're biting too close to the middle, you get that little brown spice, warm spice characteristic out of it. So we're really hoping that, within each sip is a whole peach.
Honestly, as you were saying that, I'm absolutely getting those spices on the nose before even the body. Which I don't recall specifically with the last one, but granted it was a while ago. Is this a newer thing that's come from maybe having more to work with?
It's more pronounced this year than it was last year because the fruit character is more pronounced. So everything that comes along with that has been sort of styled up.
Okay.
But we had that characteristic in the last batch. It certainly was there. It just might have been more subtle.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm definitely getting that chewiness again. It's kind of like the sides of the cheeks. It's almost like a dryness or something, which I love. Talk me through it, man. Like I love your tasting notes. I feel like they're just super unique.
Yeah, I mean, this is a funny one. I remember working with our old social media manager on the original release of this, and she did a really great job of like trying to, push me to describe things in multiple different ways, so you can kind of get more descriptive value out of it. Unfortunately, with a peach beer like this, it tastes like peaches.
I know that's unfortunate.
And so at every turn, you're like, yeah, so it tastes like peaches, and then like peach pie and peach jam and peach juice and peaches. This is the hardest beer I've ever had to describe, but certainly, as I said, the like flavor of the whole peach, the skin, the juice, the flesh, the pit. And then there's like a little bit of more of like a cooked peach characteristic, and the brown, like the warm spices sort of give you that impression of peach pie, which would traditionally have like a little bit of nutmeg or something in the filling. There is just a little bit of grain characteristic, which I think kind of echoes the like pie crust. It has like a very juicy acidity. It's very lactic. It's very front of your mouth and delicate. It doesn't burn. It really makes you salivate in a really nice way. And then, the finish is long and defined by that acid. It's just like kind of tension between fresh peaches, peach pie, and just a touch of that that like pie crust bitterness.
I think you kind of nailed that, dude. That's essentially everything I'm getting here, and you're right. It's just like an insane amount of peaches, which I don't know. You want a peach beer? God damn it! This is what this is.
Tastes like peaches.
Tastes like peaches, which is super important. I
think our original social media blast was big peach energy, which I think is accurate.
Extraordinarily. And would you say that there's a similar cousin relationship, with Firefly and the Pale Fire and Violet Moon and Séance? Like it's to me, it feels really similar. Like it feels familiar. Feels like it's a derivative, not in a bad way, but like, it's a version of, different version of, in a most positive way. which to me feels like that's what you were out to achieve with this.
Yeah, it's definitely what we're after on it. I especially like it's been a while since I've like really like done. I don't think I've ever actually done these four like back to back. And what strikes me, at least just from like somebody who makes beer, is that like this is the best example I have ever like myself tasted as to like tasting technique is, I guess, the best way I can describe it, is that like there's really like not very much flavor wise that connects. There's some, but not a ton that connects Séance and Firefly. But their relation to their barrel aged cousin is like very similar. You can really taste like that the line between Firefly and Pale Fire and between Séance and Violet Moon is similar. It's the same line. And I think that's for us that is sort of defined by technique. Like that is the way we make Séance and Firefly is expressed via that line. This is my first time kind of thinking about this, so I wish I had a more
this is great
clear-headed explanation, but I do feel like, I do. The through line feels consistent, even though the products are like quite different.
I do like that you hadn't thought about it, because that means this is a raw first time response. So, and that's okay. You don't always have to have everything, because I know you're a very meticulous man, and that's how you get down. But I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, man. I feel like I know you well enough to know that's how you get, you always have a really solid answer for everything. But I think this is cool that if you haven't really done anything like this before, I feel like I'm getting the same things. And I know these beers basically not at all, except Pale Fire, really. I had Firefly 10 months ago. I just checked earlier. It was January 2nd. And I remember having it because I swear I didn't think I had COVID. I don't think I had, but I had basically no taste. And I didn't realize I had no taste until I got really sick after Christmas. And I had it then. I could still taste it, but I feel like I didn't get the full experience. And I checked and I was like, okay. So I can see that. I can see there's lines between the two products, the barrel aged ones and then the stainless ones. You can see they're from the same sort of ilk. They're similar, but not this, like as you said, but not similar. And it's even more interesting to put them side by side with the barrel aged ones. And then we're doing those two back to back. It's kind of fascinating to really see sort of that, like, to see the sort of all of it sort of bloom and blossom and come out.
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience for me too, especially going like barrel aged stainless and then stainless barrel aged like that. Making the circle like that has been, it's been a really cool experience for me too.
So, these are just genuinely fascinating beers, and they work so well together. And I don't recall ever seeing anything exactly like this. I think this is just very innovative. It's a really fun approach to beer that can teach people something whilst also just being independently killer. All of them are fantastic.
Thanks, I appreciate that a lot.
I mean, you already know, man.
We're definitely not the first people to do this. Other breweries in town, Bellwoods has made beers second use fruit,
like mug. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, exactly, a mug. Which is great. I really like mug. But I do like our style of doing it is just really trying to focus on the difference between the first and second use, I guess, and like maximizing our usage of things. And so we're just trying to do our best to get as many expressions out of this fruit as we can, because it's just like such a beautiful ingredient, and it's like heartbreaking to imagine you got this ingredient and you put so much work into it and you didn't get everything out of it.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to get everything out of it.
I love it, man. At a time, the most still, sort of unpredictable, unstable, whatever you want to call it, time of our lifetime. I mean, like, that makes the most sense to maximize everything and never, you don't know, like we just talked about the European hops. You never know when things could just be restricted. We're not able to get stuff because of things outside of our control. So if you're able to maximize what you've got and be able to create a whole new product that sits on its own as an interesting beer, that you can talk about it in relation to its barrel aged version, but you don't have to. And at least those peaches aren't just being like, all right, well, there's a whole bunch of flavor in, but cool, let's just chuck them out. Like, you're doing something with it. I think it's dope, bro. This has been really interesting. Just before we wrap it up, do we want to just show the other ones from the series that we have, just so people can see them?
Yeah, so one I would really like to highlight that we didn't get to is Ruby.
Yes.
So Ruby's a really special beer. It is a beer that was made on International Women's Day by female identifying employees here, and it was spearheaded by our former brewer Taylor, who was an enormous part of sort of the growth and success of Avling over the last 3 years. She's since departed to pursue her own business, so check out Troublemaker TO. She does really amazing candles and soaps and lip balms, all sorts of very interesting stuff. But she spearheaded this brew and designed the recipe, so it is a beer in the same realm as Meerkat and Firefly and Séance, but it is brewed with an enormous amount of rhubarb that was processed in 3 different ways to sort of build complexity, and then it was further aged on hundreds of fresh Ontario cucumbers. All of the cucumbers were peeled and processed and added to this beer to create this like pretty amazing aromatic profile and a very interesting acidity. The rhubarb changes how the acid lands like pretty significantly. So it's a really deep and complex and interesting beer, and just a really amazing product that came from all of the female identifying people at Avling.
Very cool. I actually had this not too long ago, and it's fantastic. It's very unique. The cucumber really shines through, but the rhubarb is such an interesting ingredient. Like, it's like a earthy, yet I usually think of rhubarb in is it strawberry and rhubarb pie? Yeah. So like it's like that other little pink celery stuff that like goes into pies that it's a little bit bitter and earthy, but in a beer with cucumber, and a sour beer with cucumber is the first time I've ever seen that. And then even now you've just pointed it out that it was processed multiple ways. It was just it's a really great profile in that beer. Really, really big fan of that one. The other one we have here is Starling, which is the white wine sour.
Yeah, so Starling is almost gone. If you're interested in it, come now. That's my favorite label, I think.
Very cool.
This is a beer we made on white wine skins, fresh pressed from Rosewood. So they pressed them, and we had them in the tank that same day. It's a wine grape called Savagnin, which is rare to see, especially fresh wine. It's the grape that goes into vin jaune. If you've ever heard of vin jaune, it's just like Alpine wine from France. It's like quite unique and like just nutty. It's a very unique wine. But Rosewood had all this fresh pressed Savagnin, so we made a turbot mash beer, which is the traditional lambic profile, and then aged it with our mixed culture and those skins, and canned it. So that beer is like what I refer to as like our Chardonnay. It has like a ton of different characteristics that really mix with Chardonnay. Just a little bit of that sort of oak-like characteristic, mixing with some really nice bright fruit, bright acid, and a richness that we're really proud of.
I love that. That sounds amazing. And this was a beer we talked about earlier. Carry On, the honey beer with the new label that's looking gorgeous here. And this also has the pineapple sage, of course. That's what it had in it, which is super fire. I think we had this on the last pod.
Yeah, that's a beer that like represents Avling really beautifully. We make a beer. We grow an entire season's worth of pineapple sage, which is a really interesting, unique herb that really just tastes like pineapples. And we once a year we harvest all of the pineapple sage and chop it up, and we store it in rosewood honey, and we let the honey infuse with the pineapple sage for a good while, and then we make a beer out of it. So we've made Carry On a few times. Traditionally, it has been, like with Meerkat, a single culture beer, and now we've transitioned it to this mixed culture, and it's brought like an entirely new level of intrigue and complexity to it, and we really think it's at like a really amazing place right now. So that's a beer that's going to be coming out in a couple weeks. I highly suggest you come and try it. It's pretty special. We're proud of it.
That's amazing, man. So right now it looks like there's, tell me if this is accurate, like 6 beers from this beautiful mixed ferment culture with the wonderful golden ends on the cans. Is that correct? That's what I'm looking in front of me, but there may be more.
Yeah, there are 6 at the moment. There will be 7 or 8 by the end of the year.
Amazing.
Unless we run out. It's possible that it's actually probable that we'll run out of Starling before Christmas time, but we have 2 more likely to come out near Christmas.
Okay, so for those folks who want to get hold of this stuff, like basically get in ASAP to make sure that you grab these before they disappear. Look, without hyperbole, I think these are really special beers, dude. Like, I very much respect you and everything that you do. I know how serious you take your craft, and I was looking forward to this to see how things have changed since last year. I feel like you're always leveling up what you're doing, and everything we've had tonight. I think we're just, like you said, special beers, man. Like, they almost feel like beers you should have on a special occasion, but Avling has packaged and created them so that, you know, why should you wait to have fire beer? In a world that's kind of crazy, just crack the best stuff, and I feel like this is, you know, approachable.
Have it on that special occasion called Thursday.
That's it. Tuesday afternoon. That's how
I look at it.
Yeah, I think
every day is special.
That's it, man. I think that's the way to do it. And you can easily crush any of these as solo. You can share them, of course, but you know, you don't have to really worry too much about you know, keeping them for anything when there's a bunch of people over. So I feel like these are they're beers that are approachable, whilst also sort of, you know, they should essentially convert people to being craft beer drinkers who might be newer to the market as well. So it's the type of thing that if you're into it already, share it with your friends and maybe blow some minds with what craft beer can really be. I love it, dude. Was there anything else we wanted to touch on before we bring her on home?
No, just reiterate that, you know, coming to Avling to eat, to drink, you know, is a holistic experience. There's a lot of really cool interplay between what happens in the kitchen, what happens in the brewery. You can find our beer around town. We're very happy and proud with, you know, the bars that have us on tap, and restaurants that have us on tap. But the experience of coming here is sort of the whole hog, and I highly suggest it.
I love it. I love to see it. Let's take the thumbnail, and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll finish off air. Do you want to hold up a couple of Fire beers. Oh, let me get Pale Fire
Yeah,
and
sure.
Firefly there. Little cousins right there. There we go. Oh, yeah, oh yeah, get them. You got double hands. All right, you ready? That is stunning. Brandon, where can everybody find Avling online and in person?
You can find us at avling.ca. We are at 1042 Queen Street East in Toronto. That's in Leslieville. You
Great
can find
location.
us at beers and bars and restaurants across Southern Ontario. If you're out of town, you can find us at OG Bottle Shop. You can find us at Arabella Park. You can find us other choice spots in Hamilton, West End, lots of bars, restaurants. Just go sniffing, you'll find us. But 1042 Queen Street East, that's the place to come, have the whole experience.
Yeah, highly recommended. I've had the food there, not since it, since the menu sort of developed. So I actually am very excited to be back in town to be able to check it out. But I know the patio season, I imagine, is probably wrapped up at this point. But inside, it's a super cozy place. I've heard like everything that you've said about the food sounds amazing. I've heard other great things as well. Definitely worth trying. You've got all these beautiful sours, whether they're second use fruit or the barrel aged, plus also the classic, the IPA, the Pilsner, the Hefe, the Bohemian. I love the Bohemian Lager. The why am I having a blank? What's the V Lager? Vienna Lager is fantastic.
Vienna Lager, yeah.
I love that one. It's kind of like whatever you're into, Avling has something for you. Brandon,
that's the goal.
That's exactly it, dude. Thank you so much for your time, dude. It's a pleasure as always. I knew this would be a great one. Thank you, bro. Stick around to the end. We'll wrap it up. But guys, thank you for watching and listening. If you enjoyed the episode, smash the thumbs up, hit subscribe below, hit the notification bell so you know when the new drops. Follow us everywhere at BAOS Podcast and check us out every Wednesday, 8 p.m. We drop new ones here on YouTube and on all podcast networks, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that nonsense. We'll see you in the next one, guys. Get it in ya.